The heart of man can be very evil and deceitful. What would you do if your thirst for power required that you betray even your own blood? The tale I'm about to share is a deep one of betrayal, powered by an unrelenting drive and desire for power. This is the story of Queen Athaliah, the notorious daughter of Jezebel, who stepped out of her mother's shadow and comfort zone to seize the throne. But that decision came at a high cost because it tarnished her legacy with blood. But in the midst of all of these, the rightful heir to the throne was preserved by God. Athaliah's story begins long before her reign in Judah. She is the daughter of Jezebel, the infamous queen of Israel, and King Ahab. Remember that Jezebel is known for two major things: idolatry and cruelty. So Athaliah grows up in a palace that is deeply rooted in idolatry and cruelty. Her mother, Jezebel, is a master manipulator. She succeeded in introducing Baal worship not only to her husband, but into Israel. Not only that, she spread spiritual corruption across the land, using her influence and power. In this environment, Athaliah learns early that power is not given, it is taken. She watches her mother's hungry desire for power and control and her unyielding defiance against Yahweh. When Elijah calls down fire from heaven on Mount Carmel to prove Yahweh's power over Baal, Jezebel's response is not of repentance but revenge. Her pursuit of the prophets of Yahweh left an indelible mark on Athaliah. That experience taught her that power demands ruthlessness, and loyalty is a tool, not a virtue. So Athaliah grew up in the beautiful royal palace of Samaria, where she learned of her mother's every move. From an early age, she watched how Jezebel had her way over her husband, and observed her mother's ability to manipulate both politics and religion. These observations damaged her mindset and taught her dangerous lessons. To Athaliah, faith wasn't about devotion, but more about control. She viewed submission to any higher power or Yahweh as a weakness and saw power as the ultimate goal. Even as Athaliah gained strength from her mother's lessons, it wasn't long until she inherited Jezebel's fatal flaws, which were pride, an insatiable thirst for control and power, and blindness to the truth of Yahweh. These qualities in Athaliah became factors that would later define her life and set the stage for the darkness to come. By the time Athaliah reached adulthood, she became known for her sharp intellect and strong determination. As a princess in the royal court of Samaria and a biological daughter to Jezebel, her belief in Baal's superiority over Yahweh became the focal point of her faith and a piece of her identity. It influenced her life and greatly affected her decisions. Athaliah wasn't contented with the title of a mere princess. She didn't want to live in the shadow of her parents either. She envisioned a legacy that outlived that of her mother, Jezebel, but her quest for power would lead her far away from the land of Samaria into the land of Judah, which is synonymous with Yahweh worship. Athaliah's rise to power in Judah begins with a strategic and well-calculated marriage. To solidify an alliance between Israel and Judah, her father, King Ahab, arranges her union with Jehoram, son of Judah's faithful king, Jehoshaphat. But Athaliah does not arrive in Judah as a mere princess. She brings with her the grandeur of Samaria and the practices of her Sidonian heritage. Remember, her loyalty lies not with Yahweh, but with Baal. Under Athaliah's influence and charm, Jehoram begins to go astray and drift away from his father's ways. Soon, shrines and worship centers of Baal sprang up across Judah, and idolatry took hold of the kingdom that was once devoted to Yahweh. When Jehoram ascends the throne as king, Athaliah uses that opportunity to fuel his darkest tendencies. In a shocking display of paranoia, Jehoram orders the execution of his own brothers to secure his rule. This move would later affect Judah by driving it further from its covenant with Yahweh. Athaliah quickly established herself as a strong force in Judah's court. As a true daughter of Jezebel, raised and nurtured in the shadow of Jezebel, Athaliah was no stranger to palace politics. She learned from her mother and mastered the art of snatching and wielding power from behind the scenes. Though Jehoram is king, he soon became a pawn in Athaliah's greater plan to introduce Baal worship into Judah. Her objective was to destroy the spiritual foundation and consecration of the kingdom and replace it with the idols of her homeland. Jehoram's father, Jehoshaphat, was a godly king and was devoted to Yahweh. His reign was known for his efforts to get rid of idolatry and solidify Judah's spiritual roots. But the alliance between Israel and Judah, though politically advantageous, was a stumbling block. Through her marriage to Jehoram, Athaliah begins to undo the spirituality and legacy of faith Jehoshaphat worked so hard to establish. Athaliah didn't come to Judah as a passive observer, but wanted to be in control just like her mother. She moves carefully at first, knowing her influence must be subtle, well-planned, and executed. Her first move was to draw Jehoram away from the faith and make him a worshiper of Baal. To do this, she encourages Jehoram to tolerate idol worship. She frames it as a kind gesture to solidify ties with her homeland. This tolerance gradually turns into acceptance, and acceptance into full endorsement. Slowly, the people of Judah, who were once united in their devotion to Yahweh, began drifting towards Baal. As years pass, Athaliah's presence in Judah becomes impossible to ignore. Her strong influence was not just over Jehoram, but over the court and the kingdom's policies. Her ambition knew no limits, and her belief in Baal's supremacy drove her relentless campaign to reshape Judah. Yet even as her power grows, so does resistance from Yahweh's faithful. The priests and a remnant of believers were vigilant and alarmed at the kingdom's spiritual decline. Under Jehoram's reign, guided by Athaliah, Judah begins to crumble. Rebellions break out, weakening the kingdom both politically and spiritually, yet Athaliah remains undeterred. She sees these challenges as opportunities to solidify her grip on power. Her ambition blinds her to the warnings of Yahweh's prophets and the unrest growing among the people. The alliance between Israel and Judah, forged through Athaliah's marriage, sets the stage for a dramatic clash between light and darkness. The seeds of idolatry sown by Athaliah threatened to consume the kingdom. As the spiritual conflict grew, Judah's covenant with Yahweh was wobbling. But amidst the storm, there was hope, for Yahweh's plans are not thwarted by human ambition, and his covenant with his people remains unbroken. While Athaliah worked to cement her rule, there were unseen forces working in the background to prepare for the confrontation that would decide Judah's fate. Athaliah's ambitions finally reached their peak and became fully manifest after Jehoram's death. As a widow, she ought to be in mourning, but she shows no signs of grief. Instead, she saw her husband's passing as another step toward consolidating her power. Her son, Ahaziah, takes over the throne, but his reign is short-lived. Ahaziah was caught up in the troubles of the northern kingdom, where Jehu's violent purge against Baal worshippers led to his assassination. The news of Ahaziah's death sent shockwaves through Judah, leaving the throne vacant and putting the kingdom into deeper chaos. Still, Athaliah didn't see this as a crisis. She embraced the opportunity as a chance to ascend the throne. Surprisingly, she ordered the massacre of all royal heirs, including her own grandchildren. This bloodbath and pogrom secured her place as Judah's first and only queen to rule independently. Consequently, her name became synonymous with ruthlessness as she stained her legacy in blood. But Athaliah's victory was not final. Unbeknownst to her, one child survived her rampage. The child is Joash, the infant son of Ahaziah, who was rescued by his aunt Jehosheba and hidden inside the temple of Yahweh. Athaliah was an iron lady who ruled the entire kingdom with an iron fist. Within the first 6 years of her rule, she authorized and enforced Baal worship in the land, which drove the prophets of Yahweh into hiding. Even as she tightened her grip on the throne, the young Joash was secretly nurtured and groomed under the watchful eyes of Jehoiada, the high priest. During these formative years, Jehoiada not only protected Joash from the public, but prepared him for his glorious destiny. The young boy grew surrounded by the teachings of Yahweh and was shielded from the corrupting influences of the queen's reign. Meanwhile, Jehoiada quietly built a network of faithful priests, Levites, and military leaders who dreamt of restoring Judah to its covenantal roots. Athaliah wasted no time reshaping Judah into a kingdom that mirrored her mother's vision for Israel. Several temples and altars dedicated to Baal rose across the land, further suppressing the true worshippers of Yahweh. The sacred traditions of the kingdom were replaced with rituals of idolatry, and the priests of Yahweh were driven into hiding. Judah began to experience the same spiritual chaos that rocked Israel under Jezebel's rule. Athaliah governed the land through fear and oppression, silencing dissent and enforcing loyalty to Baal. Yet her rule was far from complete. Pockets of resistance persisted among the people, led by those who refused to bow to Baal. Whispers of a surviving heir circulated across the kingdom, boosting the faith and morale of those who clung to Yahweh's promises. Jehoiada, the high priest, emerged as the leader of those who secretly resisted Queen Athaliah's rule. His position as a high priest was an influential one, and this allowed him to rally allies in secret. He assembled a coalition of faithful priests, Levites, military leaders, and people who were devoted and faithful to Yahweh and hopeful of Judah's restoration. As the queen enforced her cruel policies, the divine hand of God was working in the shadows, making a way for his people. Athaliah's confidence in her position grew with each passing year. The overconfident queen believed she had eliminated all threats to her reign. She shifted her focus to cementing her legacy and further enthroning Baal worship in Judah, but her ambition blinded her to the unrest growing beneath the surface. The Yahweh faithful, united by Jehoiada's leadership, worked tirelessly to prepare for the moment when Judah could be restored. Within the temple walls, Joash matures under the watchful eye of Jehoiada. He is no longer an infant, but a young boy taught in the ways of Yahweh. Surrounded by the faithful, he was the hope of a kingdom waiting for deliverance. The stage was set for a confrontation between Athaliah's tyranny and the divine covenant she sought to destroy. The 7th year of Athaliah's reign came with so much tension that even the queen herself couldn't ignore it. While she believed her grip on Judah was secure, the faithful loyalists of Yahweh had been quietly preparing for her downfall. Under the leadership of Jehoiada, the high priest, plans for a dramatic restoration were finalized. Joash, now 7 years old, had grown in the safety of the temple, but was unaware that he was the hope of Judah, a nation longing and yearning for deliverance. Jehoiada's strategy was deliberate, practical, and meticulous. For years, he built and developed strategic alliances with Levites, priests, and military leaders loyal to Yahweh's covenant. These loyalists met in secret, and their resistance grew as their numbers increased daily. Rumors of rebellion spread throughout Judah. Jehoiada believed that the restoration of Judah and the Davidic lineage was beyond mere politics. He saw it as a spiritual revival for a nation that had lost its way and strayed far from its divine purpose. The day of reckoning finally arrived, disguised as a religious festival. The temple was abuzz with activities as Levites and soldiers quietly took their positions. At the climax of the celebration, Jehoiada summoned Judah's key leaders and presented the 7-year-old Joash as the rightful king. The sight of the child, a living descendant of David, brought a sense of awe and determination among the men. Standing before them, Jehoiada declared, "This is not just about reclaiming a throne, it is about restoring the covenant of Yahweh." The festival began as the sound of trumpets filled the air. Levites led the people in worship, their voices rising in praise. At the height of the celebration, Jehoiada steps forward, holding Joash's small hand as he carries him with him. Before the eyes of the gathered crowd, he places a crown on the boy's head and anoints him as king. The people erupt in jubilant cries, saying, "Long live the king, long live the king, long live the king." Their voices shake the city of Jerusalem, a thunderous rejection of Athaliah's reign. In her palace, Athaliah hears the uproar and commotion. Alarmed at the recent development, she rushes to the temple to see things for herself. Her steps are heavy with anger and fear. By the time she arrives at the temple, she is confronted with a scene she never expected. Joash, crowned as king, stands on a platform surrounded by the jubilant cheers and adoration of the people. The realization hits her like a bomb. She has been overthrown. Athaliah tears her robes in fury and gives a loud cry. She screams, "Treason! Treason!" Her voice is filled with desperation, but the crowd does not flinch. The temple guards, now under Jehoiada's command, advance and close in on Athaliah. They apprehend her and drag her outside the sacred grounds. Right there in the streets where she ruled the people through fear, cruelty, and tyranny, she meets her tragic end. Athaliah's death was a sigh of relief to the kingdom of Judah. Truly, it marked the end of an era of oppression and idolatry. The altars and worship centers of Baal were destroyed, and the temple of Yahweh was restored to its rightful place as the center of worship. Jehoiada led the people in a covenant renewal ceremony, calling them to reaffirm their allegiance to Yahweh. That marked the healing process of the kingdom. The people of Judah rejoiced, their hearts lifted by the restoration of the Davidic line. Joash, though young, was surrounded by faithful leaders who guided him in the ways of Yahweh. The spiritual foundations of Judah, shaken by years of idolatry, began to rebuild as the nation rededicated itself to the Old Covenant. Joash's reign as king was the beginning of hope and renewal. Guided by Jehoiada, the young king brought stability to a kingdom scarred by Athaliah's oppressive rule. His coronation was more than a political turning point. It brought a sense of spiritual awakening and revival to the people. The people of Judah, weary from years of darkness, embraced this new era with renewed devotion to Yahweh. Jehoiada remained the cornerstone of Joash's early reign, offering wisdom and steadfast faith that shaped the king's decisions. Together they oversaw the restoration of the temple, repairing its walls and sanctifying it as a house of worship. The altars to Baal were destroyed, and the priests of Yahweh were reinstated, their prayers and songs once again echoing through the land. For the people of Judah, this was more than rebuilding physical structures. It was a return to their identity as a covenant people. The festivals of Yahweh were celebrated with joy. The law of Moses was taught with fervor, and the nation flourished under Joash's leadership. Even as Judah thrived, the memory of Athaliah lingered as a warning. Her reign was a stark reminder of the destruction wrought by ambition unchecked by faith and the consequences of turning away from Yahweh. Her story is a tale of power, gained through cruelty and lost through divine justice. Yet, her downfall is also a story of hope. It reminds us that no matter how dark the times may be, Yahweh's faithfulness remains unbroken. He doesn't fail and will always show up to deliver his people. As Joash grew older, the challenges of leadership weighed heavily on him and tested his resolve. Without Jehoiada's guidance, his resolve faltered, and the spiritual fervor of his early reign began to wane. Yet, the foundation laid during his formative years served as a blueprint for Judah's future leaders. The story of Joash, Jehoiada, and Judah's restoration became a cornerstone of their identity, passed from generation to generation to showcase Yahweh's enduring covenant and love for his people. This story points us to a timeless truth. God's kingdom will always prevail, no matter the circumstances. God will always win, and his covenant will never fail. The dark times in your life are over. Reflect on his story. Trust God's plan for your life. Develop your faith, and believe that God has a better plan and future for you. You can't afford to give up now because the troubles and storms of life you're experiencing are only for a season. Submit to God's will, and you won't regret it. I hope this video inspires you. I need your support to keep running. I've left a Buy Me a Coffee link in the description of this video. It can also be found in my bio. Your support is crucial to keep this channel running, and you can be part of the marvelous work we are doing here. If this story inspired you, let us know in the comments. Which other powerful Bible stories would you like us to cover on this channel? And hey, before you go, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more animated stories that bring the scriptures to life.